which is the fifth. And by the word, the etymology of Gebura means to break or to divide or to cut or to sever. And it's at this very point that the spiritual energy becomes material. In other words, it's at the fifth Sephirah, which is the most destabilized chakra or most destabilized area, in which now spiritual energy has to meet the resistance of the material. And this is why from there on, all spiritual energy will be contaminated with a certain amount of material energy, more and more as it descends. And that's why in certain Kabbalistic schools, Gebura is considered the house of Mars and the house of Lucifer, or the satanic devilish principle, because it's the most destabilized and therefore would have the greatest challenges attached to it, etc., etc., etc. And there's refutations of that school as well, where people go, now wait a minute, we don't even believe that that's insinuating that material world is anti-spiritual. That already creates a philosophical problem, but we don't want to get into all of that. Then there's other people who say it's 9 and 1, that Malkuth at the bottom is 1, and then the 9 above it. So this is the beauty of Kabbalah. It's like a Rubik's Cube. It's a beautiful thing in which you can get into and study. It's something that was a very ancient doctrine. I love it because it's basically a tree. This is what gives it away, that it's originally Druidic. It's, even though they have done their best to make it look like some sort of Lego set with these circles and lines, look, it's a tree, all right? Face it. And that was the oak, that was the yew tree. This was a doctrine that was central. We find it in Nordic countries in which Odin's tree, Yggdrasil, the fantastic world ash tree, and you'll find it in all the traditions of the world, the Kabbalistic tree that often looked like a spiral or what have you, the twisted rope.
Let me ask you this,
And
Michael.
it's basically a metaphor of the soul, a metaphor of the mind.
Let me ask you this. There's a lot of talk of transhumanism, eugenics, and whatnot, and that can sound similar to transcending into the spiritual, but it seems like the Illuminati or elite or whoever's behind this New World Order, they want to do this physically. What is Blavatsky's take on all of this, on transhumanism, eugenics? Is that part of the New Age, and does that tie into Atlantis at all?
Yes, it does, because remember, she always spoke about how man fell from the primal light of all knowing, and it was through the misuse of occult knowledge and technology. Again, these are the points that our critics never bring up, because they could give a damn about occultism. They just want to bash her. They're not really interested in the metaphysics she was talking about. In her work, she talks about the root races and all of these things, and one aspect I do like about her is because she does talk about the Atlantean age. I use the word Atlantean in a slightly different context, but generally speaking, it means the prehistorical, or what's known as the pre-Diluvian period. And she's on that level. We're in sync. Her Atlantean world is my pre-Diluvian world. That I speak about in the Atlantis book.
Yeah.
In those realms, prehistorical realms, there was the very high knowledge. This is where the great adepts learned their knowledge, and we know that this knowledge must have existed because there's just too much sophisticated knowledge about language, about the stars, about astrology, about the movement of the sun, the zodiac. Let's even take herbalism. How on earth could they know to make the concoctions that they know how to make all over the world? Concoctions which is completely statistically impossible. Out of thousands and thousands of plants to make certain combinations, both hallucinogenic and other, is literally statistically impossible for so-called primitive people to ever work out. So, there's umpteen. I've got tons of the stuff in my Atlantis book and on the Atlantis website showing that it's obvious to a person who's using their brain that in ancient times there was this great knowledge. Okay, well, it's not here anymore. What happened? Blavatsky would have been from the school who very much believed that it was abused in some way. And I also believe that too, that either technologically or something to do with the intellect of man, something to do with the trauma that took place all around him, there was a falling off, a spiritual falling off. Lots of other occultists talk about this, and really, ultimately, scientists are coming to this conclusion, and so are psychologists, that there's something up, that at the base of consciousness there is this trauma, you see. Mm-hmm. And then the sacred knowledge of the adepts, including Kabbalah and all these other divination arts, have been appropriated by the bent ones, the fallen ones, the people who have, basically soulless ones who are trying to control the world. And they use the fact that man has been traumatized. They co-opt that fact so that they know that man is already vulnerable, he's weak, and he can be easily manipulated, you see. So Blavatsky was the kind of person who I believe was trying to purify people. She was a healer. She was somebody who tried to use esoteric knowledge to clean people so that they become more immune, so that they become spiritually stronger. She wasn't one of these people who used occultism to dumb people down, to manipulate them, to subliminally control them, you see, and all of this. She wasn't into any of that. And what was your question again? It was specifically about technology, right?
About transhumanism and
Oh, yeah.
eugenics.
No. See, that's well put because she, like myself, would have warned people desperately about this, that you cannot artificially upgrade the human being to the what's known in occult terms as the quintessence or the fifth element,
Hmm.
which is what technological people are desperately trying to do. It's part of the reason why they abuse the pentagram, by the way, because there's an elaborate theory in which the pentagram, the 5 points, represent that fifth element, what's called epsilon or the quintessence. It's theoretically the level to which man is meant to go, right? The super intelligent level. That's why the Chrysler Building, the Penthouse magazine, Prodigy, Pentium computers, Omega, the Pentagon. This is why you see so many of these orgs that are basically fronts for the military complex and technology. Use the pentagram as a symbol. You'll find it all over the place. It's
Hmm.
because that is a symbol of occultism, because all the technological and scientific orgs that we know about, I don't care what it is, the Genome Project, MIT, CIT, I don't care where you find it, Sun Corporation, Microsoft, Apple, all of these organizations are occult. They're part of a great sorcery. They're part of an enormous ritual that's taking place. Just because every punk who works there doesn't understand this doesn't change the fact. And the development of the agricultural age, moving up to the industrial age, the silicon age, all of this has been a motion down through time. And Blavatsky was very aware of it because she, in her writing, said that 5 other ages of man had fallen because of the same problem or a similar level. That ages come, they rise to their peak, and then sorcery takes place. And why does the sorcery take place? Because good people fail to act. Good people lose their psychological immunity. The protections get down, right? The immigration officers fall asleep. And it's exactly what's been happening in our age. Wherever you find an evil, it's because the good have fallen asleep and left the gates wide open to that pestilence, where once they actually had the power. But get back more to the point of technology. There's a theories abounding that, and even you find this in certain science fiction like Star Trek, but there's actually an understanding that there is emergence between the technologies of the world, right, including silicon and computers and organic computers, and the mind of man. There's ideologists who believe this. Many of them are in the technical field. They're hell bent on this. And there's also a positive reading of this as well, that there has to be some sort of fusion between carbon and silicon life forms, and that this will open the inner eye, and then man will be who he needs to be. This is sort of underlying the post-human idea, that there is a higher level of consciousness that is required. It involves the fusion of man and machine, the upgrading of man, and again, from an occult point of view, it means the transcendence of man to this fifth element. Now, the teachers like Blavatsky are going, wait a minute, nothing that you can do of your own effort or will can upgrade you to that level. That's not that you can't do things, but that won't necessarily lead to that state, because if you're unworthy, then obviously it's a no-brainer that you're going to end up in insanity, not in enlightenment, right? So you have the right to do things. You have the right to clean yourself. You have the right to purify yourself, but don't think that that in itself is going to actualize the fifth element. Now, these technotronic people, these post-humanists, cannot accept that. They really do 100% believe that individually, personally, on themselves, and in society in general, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And that by twiddling about with the DNA, that's number one, and twiddling about with the technologies of the world, you are going to be able to artificially inherit this fifth element. So when you see the magician standing in the pentagram, that's a metaphor for this. Because don't forget that leaves, the Fibonacci series, looking at the way trees grow, the number 5 is always connected with growth. It's very much connected with growth. You'll find this pentagonal shape in apples and in so many other areas of life. So that actually represents growth and expansion and transcendence. If you look at the crucifixion of Jesus,